in Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, and I did Curia at the St. Pius X table. I am here to talk about the 25th National Cursillo Encounter 2015, and it occurred July 23rd to the 26th. Let's see. The first one is on tap. Okay. I'm going to start off with, I woke up at 4:30 in the morning. It was a beautiful day, and I went to Mass. I went to 6:30 Mass, and then around 8 o'clock, my friends, Yolanda, Bermundo, Betty Berry, and Maria Gallagher came, and we went on a trip. Started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were planning to drive to Villanova University. And when we got there, we went to Connolly Hall, and we met Nancy, Robin, and Sister Catherine. And with them, we traveled over to Gallen Hall, where we stayed. We came and we met people. We met old friends, and we had a wonderful chat with people that we enjoyed with each other. We started off Friday morning with an auction. Here's Michael Chippy Choppy. And he was auctioning off a signed t-shirt of all the major speakers, and that t-shirt sold for over $1,200. Wow. I'm not exactly sure what the amount was, but that was what he auctioned off. We started off with a morning prayer, and then we went into the auction, and then after the auction we had our keynote speaker, Dr. Ralph Martin, and he talked about friendship with Christ. He talked about his life in college, where he lived the normal college routine, and he did it through the confusion of the 60s. And eventually, a friend of his invited him to a 3-day weekend. And during that weekend, he had an overwhelming experience and an encounter with Christ. And from that, he had growth. And he has continued on throughout his life with this growth. In this encounter with Christ, it is not static. It is always fruitful. And it is with this, our Cursillo, that we have this growth also in our friendship with other people, in small grouping, in Altrea. It is that keep going, that keep growing, that keep evangelization. This is what we're getting with our Cursillo. It is also in that piety where we are asking God, the Holy Spirit, to impel us, to enliven us. And through that grace from God, we are encouraged to move on and to evangelize. Our goal in life is to love God and love the neighbor. And that's why evangelization should and is a key component of being a Catholic. Our difficulties are opportunities. Better? Our difficulties are opportunities to allow God to take control, to learn to connect with the wisdom, and in the wisdom of the church. We connect with that and we learn from that with the saints and the doctors of the church. Grace and everything is dependent upon God, but it is our yes to God that moves us along also. Here's Jolie. She's giving us our time available. She's letting people know. Afterwards, we had Mass for Thursday. This was Friday, Holy Mass. Reverend Alex Warwowska gave us the Mass. Now here's the Cardinal coming by. So we had many priests there. After the Mass, we had Deacon Gary Tirana. He talked about charity in the 21st century, and he compared us to Corinth. Corinth was, in the Bible, a very selfish, a very prideful, and abusive city. And he said, we are like that in the United States. You can see a lot of comparison there. And St. Paul's letters to Corinth should resound and echo in us because he's talking to us also. St. Paul calls us to love, and that love should be a selfless love in charity. Christianity is showing the flesh of Jesus, which bends down to the poor. It feeds the poor, it clothes the poor, it caresses them. And that is us, Christians. This is what we are called to do also. We are encouraged on in our group reunions. And this is a key for our charity because we are giving friendship with each other and encouraging each other in our actions. Friendship helps us to grow with God. It's about making it easier for those who are far away. Here we have Betty and Nancy at the computer and assisting people to understand what's going on. So as the speakers are talking, we're bringing things up on the slideshow. The empty seats in the fronts are for the deacons during the Mass. Our next speaker was Maribel Gomez. It's about attitudes and reactions. She really nailed it in her talk. It's about positive attitudes and how we respond to things that are happening around us. It's not how we do things. Attitude is how we respond to these stimulations. And she gave stories. She's talked about her son. She talked about work and how she responded to it, initially in the poor context, and then finally she turned it around and she said, it was my response that was wrong. Not what was going wrong, but it was my response. And she said she looked forward in how to change. She says it's the square meter around us that what we are impacting, this is what we're making holy. So it's the person in front of us. It's the activities that we are doing. And in all things, we should thank God in this square meter of our location. This is how we sanctify and we give gratitude to God. Our next speaker was Christopher Short. Now I'll be coming up in a moment here. Christopher Short was our Artrea speaker. He talked about Christ in his life, and he talked about an incident again, the story of his life. He said initially there was a time when he was driving along and he was trying to decide whether or not to go to Mass, which he knew mentally that this was good, or go to yard sales. And if anybody knows about yard sales, early morning is the best time when to buy things. And it was choices, and he was actually feeling this tug of which way to go, which was more important to him at that time. Eventually, a friend of his invited him to a 3-day weekend. Again, God infused him with grace. He grew in his love of God. He learned about himself, about God, and how to look at others. During this talk, after what Christopher gave, we had echoes of Napoleon Hernandez and Bain Bin. I don't know if I mentioned his name properly. He was our Vietnamese speaker. And finally, the summation was done by Father Jack. And out of all of this, one of the features, statements that came that really impacted me was, an unreflected life is not worth living. It's both reflecting God out in our activity, but also looking at what has gone on today. How did you interact? How was your attitude impacting others in what you were doing? How did you sanctify your life? So an unreflected life is not worth living. The following day, Saturday, was Reverend John Myers, and he talked about prayer and discernment. He said, if you want to study prayer, the Catechism's 4th pillar is key on prayer. This is a good source, an excellent source to go to study about prayer, how to pray, who to pray to, how this interaction grows in you. Prayer is also a battle. Battle in prayer is distraction, what I want instead of what God wants. And to discern what these distractions are and what the sources are, we need to look at St. Ignatius of Loyola and growing about it. What you just saw there, he said that studying the environment, if you go with the flow like the fish, you go downstream. So that was my little key there. And by the way, all these pictures, every single one of them, was at Villanova. Some of the sayings during that talk was, no one is called to be comfortable. We are called to live out our life in peace and know who God is in charge. Walter Benavides did the talk on the means to energize our fourth day. We need to be energized, and God is our source of energy. And we also get this energy through the sacramental experiences of confession and Mass, but we also get it in our group reunions from one another, in our friendship, and in Altrea, where we encourage each other on, and in our school of leaders. These are sources of grace, both sanctifying grace in Mass and the graces that we get with each other in encouraging each other. We should spread the news in our small things, in our everyday life, in what we do. Again, we had Mass. This time, the Most Reverend Carlos Sevilla was our Mass provider. And then we moved on into, this is our scene of the priests and deacons. And they sang that night. This really touched me. Their singing, I enjoyed it immensely. It was a grace-filled moment for me. Later on, we had a raffle of the painting. I don't know how much it would cost. This was the front of our book, but the raffle was on the painting itself. And this was to help reduce costs in the national counter registration fees, helps to offer reduced prices in books. It also is used to assist in establishing Cursillo in areas where it's needed, or reinvigorating Cursillos where it has gone dormant. So we donate money. So there was a lot of things to help encourage finances for the growth. And then finally, we also had our fiesta. This is where we had our party, where each group had songs and dances, did entertaining. We had, in this case, the Sister Act. And one of the groups came up. They were wearing plastic bags and all dressed up as sisters, and there's priests and deacons in here. And they did a mouth sync of "I Will Follow Him." This is one of the things that a lot of people truly enjoyed the presentation of. But it was all in keeping with Cursillo and the fiesta. Our singing, Nancy and Robin, were part of the singing groups, and I couldn't get a good picture of that. So, and finally, we have Yoli, again, enjoyment and celebration of our fiesta. So my take in all of this, it is a grace-filled moment. It is grace throughout this time. It was holy prayer in the morning. We had Mass every day. The confession was offered. So we had sacramental graces. We had adoration, parts where we can ask God and experience God. We had small groups. We had Altrea. We had a fiesta. So it was in friendship with one another that we had growth in life. This is two paths, people taking different paths, but they were all Cursillistas. And even though we were walking different paths, God was with us, sharing us our time. Here's our Diocese of Harrisburg, the English group. There's Sister Catherine, Father Weary, Nancy Keener, Betty Berry, Yolanda Bermundo, I think it was Scott Strong, I think it was Major. Scott Major, Robin was there, Michael Chippy Choppy, Maria Gallagher, and me, Mary Ritter. So this is our group of 10 that was representative. And then finally, we had our breakfast Sunday morning. Here's Father Weary, Yolanda, and Betty. Again, meeting one final time before we go on our individual ways, encouraging each other and giving us strength and talking about events. Thank you very much. De Colores.